In the age when the earth still whispered, there were things that moved without feet, forces that spoke without mouths, truths that existed long before any book was opened, long before any map was drawn, long before the world agreed on what power even meant. Africa knew. Africa had always known, and what she knew, they tried to bury. But something buried this deep does not stay quiet forever. Thousands of years ago, long before Rome built its first wall, long before Greece carved its first column, a civilization rose on African soil so advanced, so deeply tuned to the forces of the universe, that the people who came after could not explain it, so they chose to ignore it. We are talking about kingdoms that did not just build cities. They built in harmony with the stars. They aligned their tempos with the movement of planets. They calculated the motion of the sun with precision that modern engineers still marvel at today. The ancient Egyptians, Kemet, whose name literally meant the Black Land. The people of Mali, who built an empire that controlled more gold than any civilization on earth at the time. The Yoruba of West Africa, whose cosmological system mapped out the structure of reality itself. The Dogon people of present-day Mali, who described the movement of Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked human eye, centuries before any telescope was powerful enough to find it. How? That is the question that should have changed everything. But here is what they didn't want you to ask. According to oral traditions passed down through generations of griots, the ancient African understanding of power was never about domination. It was about alignment. The elders believed that the universe was alive. Not metaphorically, literally alive. Breathing, listening, responding. In Yoruba tradition, this living force was called Ewitgrave, the divine energy that flows through all things. Through trees, through rivers, through spoken words, through the hands of a healer, through the grief of a mother. It is said among the people that when a Yoruba elder spoke with true intention, the words themselves carried weight, not just meaning, but force. As if language was not a human invention, but a channel already existing in nature, waiting to be used. Among the Bantu-speaking peoples of Central and Southern Africa, there was a concept called Ubuntu, I am because we are. But Ubuntu was not simply a social philosophy. It was a map of spiritual reality. The belief that no individual soul exists alone, that human consciousness is woven together, like threads in a cloth, invisible but unbreakable. And then there was Maat, the ancient Kemetic principle of cosmic balance. Not just justice, not just truth, but the invisible law that holds the universe from collapse. The ancient Egyptians believed civilization could only survive if its rulers governed in alignment with Maat. That balance was not a luxury. It was survival. And this is where it becomes even more mysterious. Now here is what modern history books never fully explained. When European scholars first arrived in West Africa and encountered the Ifá divination system of the Yoruba, a system of 256 chapters, each containing hundreds of verses, encoding everything from medicine, to governance, to astronomy, to psychology, they did not call it a library, they called it primitive ritual. But UNESCO disagreed. In 2008, UNESCO declared the Ifá Oracle System a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity, because what the Yoruba had created was not superstition. It was a binary mathematical system, 16 base symbols, arranged in pairs, creating 256 possible combinations. The same binary logic at the foundation of every modern computer. Think about that. Centuries before computers existed, before anyone in Europe had even imagined binary code, Yoruba priests called Babalawos were using it to read patterns, make decisions, diagnose illness, predict outcomes. But that was only the beginning. Because the same civilization that produced Ifá also produced something else, something that was taken from them, scattered across the Atlantic in chains, and still managed to survive. The spiritual systems of enslaved African people, Candomblé in Brazil, Vodou in Haiti, Santeria in Cuba, these were not the inventions of broken people trying to cope. They were ancient African science. Fragments of a whole. Pieces of a knowledge system so powerful that even after centuries of oppression, forced conversion, and cultural erasure, they could not be killed. What happened next changed everything. Because those fragments began to reconnect. Scholars are only now beginning to map what ancient Africans already lived. The Great Zimbabwe, a stone city built without mortar, without metal tools as we understand them, walls so precisely dry stacked that they have stood for over 700 years. Modern engineers visited this site and said, quietly, that they did not know how it was done. The Lalibela churches of Ethiopia, 11 monolithic churches carved downward into solid rock, not built upward, but excavated from the earth, as if the builders saw the structure inside the mountain and simply removed everything that wasn't it. Built in the 12th century. Still standing. Still used for worship. Still unexplained. Or consider Timbuktu. Not the myth, not the distant joke that European languages turned it into, but the real Timbuktu. A city where 25,000 students once studied at the University of Sanko, where over 1 million manuscripts were written and preserved, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, law, philosophy. 1 million manuscripts, in a city the world was told was barbaric. What they discovered when those manuscripts were finally opened was beyond belief. Maps of the human circulatory system written before European medicine knew veins from arteries. Surgical procedures documented before the same procedures were discovered in Europe. Calculations of the Earth's circumference recorded in texts that sat in Timbuktu libraries while Europe still debated whether the Earth was flat. The knowledge was never lost. It was hidden. And some of it is still being found. But perhaps the most powerful hidden truth of ancient Africa is not about architecture, or astronomy, or mathematics. It is about consciousness. The ancient Kemetic priests believed that the human being was not just a body, that the body was a vehicle. That inside every person existed a soul complex. The Ka, the Ba, the Ok, each representing a different dimension of self. The Ka, the life force. The energy double that mirrors the physical body. The Ba, the personality. The unique self that persists after death. The Ok, the transformed spirit, the self that becomes one with light. This was not mythology for entertainment. This was a system of understanding the human mind and spirit that modern psychology is only beginning to glimpse. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists in Western history, spent years studying ancient Egyptian texts. He borrowed their symbolic frameworks for the unconscious mind. He called it discovering. But the Kemetic priesthood called it Tuesday. And here is what the elders believed, what oral traditions across the continent agree on, across Yoruba, Igbo, Akan, Zulu, Dogon, and Fon traditions. The human being is not separate from the universe. The mind of a human being is a mirror of the cosmos. What happens in the stars is reflected in the soul. What happens in the soul shapes the world. This was not a comforting story. This was a responsibility. Because if you are connected to everything, then everything you do matters. Even what you think. Even what you remember. Even what you choose to forget. And some secrets were never meant to be forgotten. There is a Zulu proverb that says, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. A person is a person through other people. And perhaps that is the final hidden power. Not a weapon. Not a technology. Not a secret that can be locked away. But a way of seeing. Ancient African civilization did not just build great structures. It built great ways of understanding what it means to be human. And when that understanding was suppressed, when the books were burned, the languages forbidden, the names changed, something extraordinary happened. The knowledge went underground, into songs, into dances, into the way a grandmother holds a child, into the rhythm of a drum that somehow, across an ocean, sounds like home. Into a language that was beaten out of people, and yet returned, generation after generation, in the way they pray, in the way they grieve, in the way they remember. Perhaps the most powerful thing about ancient African wisdom is not that it survived. It is that it was never designed to die. And even today, in laboratories, in philosophy departments, in spiritual communities across the world, people are arriving at the same conclusions that African elders encoded thousands of years ago. Some secrets were never meant to be understood quickly. Some truths take centuries to come home. And perhaps, the past is not as silent as we think. Megaphone Section 8, Soft CTA, 9:30 to 10 o'clock. Many ancient African stories remain untold. Many kingdoms are still buried. Many manuscripts are still sealed. Many truths are still waiting. If this story moved something in you, if you felt, for even a moment, the weight of what was hidden, then you already understand why this work matters. Subscribe to Ancient African History. Because the world needs to remember what the world was told to forget.